December 1943. Camp Grant, Illinois. Werner Hoffman sat on the edge of his bunk in Barracks 7, holding a photograph he'd memorized 6 months ago. The edges were soft now, creased from handling. In the picture, Elsa smiled up at him from a park in Stuttgart, summer light catching her hair. That photo was taken in 1940, 3 weeks before he'd been drafted, before Tunisia, before the surrender, before he'd become prisoner number 47 to 2891 in a country he'd once been taught to hate. Outside, December wind rattled the barracks windows. Inside, 50 German soldiers tried to stay warm under thin blankets, their breath visible in the frigid air. Some wrote in journals no one would ever read. Others stared at ceiling beams, counting the days since capture, the weeks since they'd heard anything from home. The silence was its own kind of prison. Worse than the barbed wire. Werner traced his thumb across Elsa's face. She'd be 26 now. The last letter he'd received was postmarked April 12, 1943, forwarded through the chaos of North Africa before Rommel's collapse. In it, she'd told him she was pregnant. He'd done the math 1,000 times since then. The baby would have been born in October. A daughter, he imagined. He had no reason to think it was a daughter except that he wanted to believe Elsa would have a piece of herself to hold on to if he never came home. But that was 8 months ago. 8 months of silence. He didn't know if Elsa had received any of his letters from the Afrika Korps. He didn't know if Stuttgart still stood or if it had joined the growing list of German cities reduced to rubble by Allied bombers. He didn't know if his wife was alive. He didn't know if his child existed anywhere beyond his imagination. The not knowing was worse than combat had ever been. Across the barracks, Otto Miller sat with his back against the wall, knees drawn up, face buried in his arms. Otto was 23, a baker's son from Hamburg who'd been conscripted in 1942 and sent almost immediately to Africa. He'd survived El Alamein, survived the retreat, survived the final desperate stand in Tunisia. But tonight, something in him had broken. Werner set down the photograph and crossed to his friend's bunk. Otto? No response. Just the slight shake of shoulders. Otto, talk to me. Hamburg, Otto said, his voice muffled. Schneider told me. He heard it from the guards. Werner felt his stomach drop. He'd heard the rumors too. In late July, the British had bombed Hamburg for 8 straight days. The firestorm had been visible from 200 kilometers away. The whole city, Otto continued, looking up. His eyes were red. Operation Gomorrah, they called it. 40,000 dead, maybe more. My parents lived in Hammerbrook, right in the center. His voice cracked. I haven't heard from them since May. May, Werner. That was before. He couldn't finish. Werner sat down beside him. What could he say? That it might not be true? They both knew it probably was. That Hamburg had burned. That most of Hammerbrook was ash. That Otto's parents, like so many others, had likely died in a firestorm created by bombs dropped from British planes. Retaliation for bombs dropped from German planes. Retaliation for bombs dropped before that. On and on. The logic of war devouring everything. I just want to know, Otto whispered. Even if they're gone, I just want to know. This not knowing, it's killing me, Werner. Every day I wake up thinking maybe today they'll let us write home. Maybe today we'll get mail. But it's been 6 months. 6 months of nothing. Werner understood. They all did. Every man in Barracks 7, in all the barracks at Camp Grant, carried the same weight. The Geneva Convention was supposed to allow prisoners to send and receive mail. But the American military, citing security concerns and screening limitations, had suspended the privilege indefinitely. No letters in, No letters out. Just silence stretching across an ocean, across a war, across the growing distance between who they'd been and who they were becoming. "I have a daughter," Werner said quietly. "At least I think I do. Elsa was pregnant when I was captured. The baby would be over a year old now. I don't know her name. I don't know if Elsa is even—" He stopped. Saying it aloud made it too real. Otto looked at him. "You never told me. I don't talk about it. Talking about it makes it hurt more." Werner picked up a pebble someone had brought in from the exercise yard, rolled it between his fingers. "But sometimes I imagine her, my daughter. I imagine what she looks like, whether she has Elsa's eyes. I imagine teaching her to read someday, the way I taught my students in Stuttgart. I imagine simple things, ordinary things. And then I remember I might never—" His throat tightened. They sat in silence for a while. 2 men among 500, all of them suspended between a past they couldn't return to and a future they couldn't see. Outside the barracks, footsteps crunched in the frozen mud. Captain James Mitchell made his evening rounds through the camp, his breath fogging in the December air. He'd been assigned to Camp Grant for 7 months now, overseeing the German prisoners captured in Tunisia. At first, he'd expected to hate them. These were the enemy. These were the men who'd fought alongside those who'd bombed London, who'd invaded France, who'd started the whole damn war. But hatred was harder to maintain when you saw them up close every day. They weren't monsters. They were mechanics and farmers and teachers. Kids, mostly. Conscripts who'd been handed rifles and told where to point them. Some had believed in the cause, sure, but most had simply done what young men did when their country called. They'd served. And now they were here, 5,000 miles from home, waiting for a war to end while their families faced bombs they couldn't protect them from. Mitchell paused outside Barracks 7, listening to the quiet murmur of voices inside. He thought about his own wife, Margaret, back in Ohio. She wrote him every 3 days like clockwork. Her letters kept him sane. They reminded him that somewhere beyond this camp, beyond this war, there was still a life worth living. Love letters disguised as news from home, updates about her teaching job, about the Victory Garden, about their dog Chester who kept digging up the tomatoes. Small things, beautiful things. Things that mattered precisely because they were ordinary. What would it do to him, he wondered, if those letters stopped coming? If for 6 months, a year, longer, he heard nothing? If he didn't know whether Margaret was alive or dead? Whether their house still stood, whether the life they'd built together had survived? He'd go insane. He knew he would. Mitchell continued his rounds, past Barracks 8, past the mess hall, past the guard towers where young American soldiers stamped their feet against the cold and watched the wire. The camp held 500 German prisoners now, with more expected as the war continued grinding forward in Italy and the Pacific. They worked during the day, laundry duty, kitchen detail, maintenance work, and returned to their barracks at night. The routine was numbing. Predictable, safe if safety meant the slow erosion of hope. But there were moments of humanity too, small cracks in the armor of war. Last week, Private First Class Danny Rodriguez had shared his cigarettes with a group of prisoners during their break. Not supposed to, but he did it anyway. The Germans had taught him a card game called Scat in return. Now they played every Tuesday evening, guards and prisoners hunched around a makeshift table, laughing at bad jokes in broken English and broken German. Sergeant William Chen, who spoke German because his mother had been a translator before the war, ran informal English classes for prisoners who wanted to learn. 20 men showed up every Monday and Thursday evening, scratching out vocabulary words on scraps of paper, practicing pronunciation. Water, food, home, please, thank you. The basics of survival in a new language. These weren't grand gestures of reconciliation. They were just men trying to stay human in a situation designed to strip humanity away. Mitchell understood the regulations. He understood why male privileges had been suspended. Censoring letters took time and personnel the military didn't have. There were concerns about coded messages, about intelligence leaking back to Germany. The concerns weren't unreasonable, but neither was the cost. He reached the administrative building and climbed the steps to his office. Inside, on his desk, sat 3 letters from Margaret. He'd read them each twice already, but would read them again before bed. He picked up the most recent one, dated November 28th. Her handwriting was precise, each letter carefully formed. She'd been a school teacher before the war, and she still wrote like one. Dearest James, Chester is officially a menace. He dug up all 6 of the tomato plants yesterday. I found him in the garden, covered in dirt, proud as could be. I should have been angry, but he looked so pleased with himself that I just laughed. It felt good to laugh. There's been too little of that lately. Mrs. Patterson's son was killed in Italy last week. She's destroyed. I brought her a casserole and sat with her for a while, but what can you say? What words help when someone loses their child? I keep thinking about all the mothers like her on both sides, all of them losing sons. For what? I'm sorry. That's not fair to put in a letter. You're doing important work, I know that. I just miss you. I miss you terribly. Come home safe, my love. Yours always. Margaret Mitchell set the letter down and stared out the window at the darkened camp. Come home safe. Simple words that meant everything. The next morning, during breakfast roll call, Werner made a decision. It had formed slowly, over weeks of watching Otto deteriorate, over nights of lying awake, imagining Elsa and the daughter he'd never met. The decision crystallized into something solid, something he couldn't ignore anymore. He would ask, officially. He would request permission to write home. The answer would probably be no. It had been no for 6 months, but he had to try. He had to do something other than wait and wonder and slowly go mad from not knowing. After breakfast, he approached Sergeant Chen, who was supervising the morning work assignments. Sergeant Chen, sir, may I speak with you? Chen looked up from his clipboard. He was a stocky man in his 30s, with patient eyes and a careful way of listening that made men want to trust him. What is it, Hoffman? I would like to request permission to write to my wife. In Germany. Chen's expression softened. Hoffman, you know the policy. Male privileges are suspended pending. I know the policy, sir. I'm asking anyway. Werner kept his voice respectful but firm. My wife was pregnant when I was captured. I have not heard from her in 8 months. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if my child was born. I'm asking for the chance to find out. Chen was quiet for a moment. Let me see what I can do. No promises. Thank you, sir. It wasn't much, but it was something. That afternoon, Chen mentioned the conversation to Captain Mitchell. They were in the camp administration building, reviewing supply requisitions for the coming month. Chen set down his pen and said, One of the prisoners asked about mail this morning. Werner Hoffman, Barracks 7. His wife was pregnant when he shipped out to Africa. He hasn't heard anything in 8 months. Mitchell looked up. What did you tell him? That I'd see what I could do, which is nothing officially. But James, Chen leaned back in his chair. These men are going insane. I'm watching it happen. The isolation, the not knowing what's happening to their families while their cities get bombed to rubble, it's breaking them. We've had 3 suicide attempts in the last 2 months. 3. These aren't hardened Nazis. They're kids who got conscripted and ended up on the wrong side of a war they didn't start. Mitchell was quiet. He'd seen the same thing Chen had. The slow erosion of morale, the 1,000-yard stares, the men who'd stopped talking, stopped eating, stopped caring whether they lived or died. Geneva Convention says they're allowed mail. Chen continued. We're violating that. I know why. I understand the security concerns. But there has to be a way. Something. Like what? I don't know. But watching Hoffman ask about his baby this morning, watching him try to keep his dignity while he's begging for something that should be his right. Chen shook his head. It got to me. That's all. Mitchell thought about Margaret's letters, about the lifeline they represented, about what it would mean to be cut off from that. Let me think about it, he said. That evening, Werner returned to Barrack 7 to find Otto lying on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't eaten dinner, hadn't gone to the English class, just lay there, motionless. Otto, Werner said, you have to eat. What's the point? The point is you're alive. For what? Otto turned his head to look at Werner. To sit in this barracks until the war ends? To go home to a city that doesn't exist anymore? To a family that's probably dead? Tell me, Werner, what's the point? Werner sat down on his own bunk across the narrow aisle. He pulled out Elsa's photograph, looked at her smile. The point is that maybe she's still out there. Maybe your parents made it out of Hamburg. Maybe Elsa got my letters and she's waiting for me. Maybe my daughter is alive and healthy and I'll meet her someday. Maybe is a reason to stay alive. Maybe is torture. Maybe is hope. Otto closed his eyes. I'm so tired, Werner. I'm so tired of hoping. Werner understood. He felt it too, the exhaustion of hoping against the silence, of building entire futures in his imagination, only to have them collapse every morning when no mail arrived. But what else was there? Despair was easier, maybe. But despair was also surrender. I asked Sergeant Chen today if I could write home, Werner said. He said he'd see what he could do. Otto opened his eyes. They'll say no. They always say no. Probably, but I asked anyway. For a moment, something flickered across Otto's face. Not hope, exactly. But maybe the memory of what hope felt like. If they let you write, Otto said quietly, I want to write too. Even if my parents are gone. Even if the letter goes to a pile of rubble. I want to write it anyway. Werner nodded. Then, we'll write together. 3 days later, Captain Mitchell requested a meeting with the camp commander, Colonel Thomas Brennan. Brennan was a career military man, 52 years old, with a rigid spine and a reputation for following regulations to the letter. Mitchell had served under him long enough to know that convincing him of anything outside standard protocol would be nearly impossible, but he had to try. Brennan's office smelled of cigar smoke and old leather. The colonel sat behind his desk, reviewing a document, and didn't look up when Mitchell entered. Sir, I'd like to discuss the mail situation with the German prisoners. There's nothing to discuss, Brennan said, still reading. Mail privileges are suspended pending security review. You know this. I do, sir. But the cost is significant. We're seeing increasing mental health issues among the prisoners, suicide attempts, violent outbreaks, men losing hope. The lack of contact with their families is destroying them. They're prisoners of war, Captain, not guests at a resort. They're human beings, sir. And the Geneva Convention guarantees them the right to correspond with their families. Brennan finally looked up. His eyes were hard. The Geneva Convention also allows for security measures when necessary. Screening 500 prisoners' mail would require personnel and resources we don't have. The decision has been made. Mitchell hesitated. Then he said, "Sir, may I speak freely?" "You may. I have a wife, Margaret. She writes me every 3 days. Her letters are the only thing that keep me sane. If I went 6 months without hearing from her, not knowing if she was alive or dead, I'd lose my mind. These men are no different. They're scared. They're homesick. They're human. Denying them contact with their families isn't security. It's cruelty." Brennan's jaw tightened. For a moment, Mitchell thought he'd crossed a line, that he was about to be dismissed, maybe even disciplined. But then something changed in the colonel's face. The hardness cracked, just slightly. "My son is in Italy," Brennan said quietly. "Lieutenant Robert Brennan, 34th Infantry Division. He's been MIA since October 14th, 2 months ago. The War Department says they're investigating, that they'll notify me when they have information. But every morning I wake up and I don't know if my boy is alive or dead. Every morning I check the mail hoping for something, anything. And every morning there's nothing." He set down the document he'd been reading. Mitchell saw that his hands were shaking slightly. "So, yes, Captain, I understand what it means to not know. I understand what the silence does to you. I live it every damn day." Mitchell waited. "But I can't just authorize unrestricted mail," Brennan continued. "The security concerns are real. If we establish precedent here, every camp in the system will have to follow suit. The logistics are impossible." "What if there was another way?" Mitchell said. "What if we didn't send the mail directly?" "What do you mean?" "The Red Cross. They have diplomatic channels through neutral countries, Switzerland specifically. If we route the prisoners' letters through the International Red Cross in Geneva, they can forward them to Germany through their networks. The Red Cross already handles POW mail for other countries. It's established protocol, and it keeps the mail out of our direct handling, which addresses the security concern." Brennan considered this. "You'd still need someone to censor the content before it ships. Make sure they're not passing intelligence. We have German speakers on staff. Sergeant Chen could coordinate a review process. The prisoners write their letters, Chen's team reviews them, approved letters go to the Red Cross. Anything sensitive gets flagged." "How many prisoners are we talking about?" "All of them, potentially. But we could start with a pilot program. 20 prisoners. See if the system works. If it does, we expand. If it doesn't, we shut it down." Brennan was quiet for a long time. Mitchell could see the war happening behind his eyes. Duty fighting against compassion, regulations fighting against humanity. Finally, the colonel said, 20 prisoners, 1-month trial. Chen oversees all screening. Any letter that even hints at intelligence value gets burned. Any prisoner caught trying to circumvent the system loses the privilege permanently. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "And Mitchell, if this blows up, it's your ass, not mine." "Understood, sir." Mitchell left the office feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, he could give these men something that mattered. He found Sergeant Chen in the mess hall and told him the news. Chen's face broke into a rare smile. 20 prisoners. It's a start. Get me a list of 20 men who've shown good behavior, who have families they haven't heard from. We'll start with them. Hoffman should be on that list. Put him at the top. That evening, Werner was sitting in Barracks 7, teaching Otto a few English phrases, when Sergeant Chen appeared in the doorway. "Hoffman, come with me." Werner's stomach dropped. Had he done something wrong? Was this about his request? He followed Chen out into the cold December evening, across the compound to the administration building. Chen led him to a small office and gestured to a chair. "Sit." Werner sat, his heart hammered. Chen pulled out a chair across from him and sat down too. His expression was unreadable. "You asked about writing home?" Chen said. "Yes, sir." Captain Mitchell spoke with the colonel. "They've approved a pilot program. 20 prisoners will be allowed to write letters home through the Red Cross network. You're one of them." Werner stared at him. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did, and his chest constricted so hard he couldn't breathe. "I can write to Elsa?" "One letter to start. We'll see how it goes. But yes, you can write to your wife." Werner's eyes filled. He tried to speak, couldn't. Tried again. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The letter has to be reviewed. No military information, no intelligence, nothing that could compromise security. You write about your family, that's it. Understand?" "Yes, sir. Yes, I understand." Chen handed him a piece of paper and a pencil. "You can write it tonight. Bring it to me tomorrow morning. We'll start the review process." Werner took the paper with shaking hands. It felt impossibly light. Just paper, just graphite. But it was a bridge across silence, across an ocean, across the miles between him and everything he loved. He walked back to Barracks 7 in a daze. Otto looked up when he entered. "What happened?" "They're letting me write home," Werner said. His voice broke. "Otto, they're letting me write home." The barracks went quiet. 50 men turned to look at him. "You're serious?" Otto said. 20 of us. A pilot program. I'm on the list. I can write to Elsa. I can..." He couldn't finish. The tears came then, hot and sudden, and he didn't care who saw. Otto stood and crossed to him, pulled him into a hard embrace. Other men gathered around, patting his shoulders, murmuring congratulations in German, sharing in the moment because they understood what it meant. Hope. Real, tangible hope. That night, Werner sat on his bunk with the paper Chen had given him and tried to figure out how to fit 8 months of longing into words. "My dearest Elsa, I don't know if this letter will reach you. I don't know if you'll ever read these words. But I'm writing them anyway because I need you to know that I'm alive. I'm in America. I'm safe. And I think about you every single day. Are you safe? Is the baby safe? I do the math constantly. If everything went as it should, we have a daughter. She would be over a year old now. Does she have your eyes? Does she laugh the way you do? What's her name, Elsa? I lie awake imagining it. Anna, maybe. Or Sophie. Or something I haven't thought of. I imagine teaching her to read someday, reading her the same stories my father read to me. I imagine coming home to you. The Americans here are not what I expected. Some are kind. One captain, Mitchell, he made this letter possible. He didn't have to do that. But he did. I think he understands what it means to love someone. I miss you so much, it hurts. I miss the way you hummed while you cooked. I miss your terrible jokes. I miss the sound of your voice saying my name. I miss everything about the life we built together. And I'm terrified that life doesn't exist anymore. That Stuttgart is gone. That you're gone. that I'm writing to a ghost. But I have to believe you're out there. I have to believe you're reading this. I have to believe I'll hold you again someday. Stay safe, my love. Stay alive. Wait for me. Forever yours, Werner. He folded the letter carefully and held it against his chest. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft and silent. Inside Barracks 7, men slept or pretended to sleep, each carrying their own weight of separation and longing. Werner looked at the photograph of Elsa one more time before tucking it under his pillow. Tomorrow he would give the letter to Sergeant Chen, and then he would wait. But this waiting felt different. This waiting had purpose. This waiting had hope. The next morning, Werner delivered his letter to Sergeant Chen's office with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Chen took it without comment, added it to a small stack on his desk, and told Werner he'd know within a week whether it was approved. 7 days had never felt longer. But something had shifted in Barracks 7. Word had spread about the pilot program, about the 20 men who'd been selected. The atmosphere changed. Not dramatically. The barracks was still cold, the food still bland, the barbed wire still surrounded them. But there was a current of something new underneath the routine. Possibility. The faint, fragile sense that maybe they weren't completely forgotten. Otto hadn't been on the initial list of 20. He'd taken the news quietly, with the resignation of someone who'd stopped expecting good things. But Werner had seen him watching as others were called to Chen's office, seen the way his friend's jaw tightened when another prisoner returned clutching blank paper and a pencil. On the 4th day after Werner submitted his letter, Otto approached Sergeant Chen during the morning work detail. "Sir, I'd like to request permission to write home as well." Chen looked up from his clipboard. He'd been reviewing the same supply requisition for 10 minutes, his mind clearly elsewhere. "You're not on the approved list, Miller." "I know, sir. But I'm asking anyway. My parents were in Hamburg when the city was bombed. I haven't heard from them since May. I know they're probably dead. The address is probably just rubble. But I need to write the letter anyway. Even if it goes nowhere, I need to try." Chen studied him. Otto Miller was thin, too thin, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested sleep came rarely and poorly. Chen had watched him deteriorate over the past months, watched the light go out of him bit by bit. "Let me see what I can do," Chen said. "No promises." "Thank you, sir." That evening, Chen found Captain Mitchell in the officers' mess, picking at a plate of reconstituted potatoes and mystery meat that might have been beef, but probably wasn't. "We need to expand the program," Chen said, sitting down across from him. Mitchell looked up. "We've barely started the pilot. Give it time." Another prisoner asked today, Otto Miller, Hoffman's friend. His parents were in Hamburg during the firestorm. He knows they're probably dead, but he wants to write anyway. And he's not the only one. I've had 6 more requests since we announced the pilot program. 6 men in 4 days, James. And those are just the ones brave enough to ask. Mitchell set down his fork. The colonel authorized 20. That's what we've got to work with. So we go back to him, show him it's working, ask for more. We don't even know if it's working yet. None of the letters have been sent. We're still reviewing them. Then let's finish the review and get them sent. Prove the system works, then we expand. Chen leaned forward. These men are dying inside, James. Not physically, not yet, but inside where it matters. We have a chance to give them something to hold on to. We can't stop at 20. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How many of the 20 letters have you reviewed so far?" 14? They're all clean. Nothing remotely resembling intelligence. Just men pouring their hearts out to people they love. It's... Chen paused, searching for the word. It's heartbreaking, honestly. Reading them. Seeing what this war has done to ordinary people. Any problems with the censorship process? None. I've got 3 German-speaking staff helping me. We flag anything questionable, but so far there's been nothing. These men aren't stupid. They know what's at stake. They're careful. Mitchell picked up his fork again, pushed a potato around his plate. All right. Finish reviewing all 20 letters. If they're clean, we'll package them up and send them to the Red Cross contact in Chicago. Once we confirm the Red Cross can handle the volume and the routing works, I'll go back to Brennan. Ask for permission to expand to 50 prisoners. Then 100, however many we can manage. Chen allowed himself a small smile. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This could still blow up in our faces. But 3 days later, all 20 letters had been reviewed and approved. They were simple, aching documents. Men writing to wives, to parents, to children they hadn't seen in years, asking if their families were safe, describing life in the camp in careful, neutral language, making promises about the future, about reunions, about the lives they'd rebuild when the war finally ended. Werner's letter to Elsa was among them, reviewed and approved without changes. The next step was establishing contact with the Red Cross. Captain Mitchell had done his research. The International Committee of the Red Cross, headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, maintained extensive networks for facilitating communication with prisoners of war. They'd been doing it since the First World War, routing letters through neutral countries, maintaining massive databases of prisoner locations, serving as the humanitarian thread that held some semblance of civilization together even as the world tore itself apart. But the system was designed primarily for American and British prisoners held in German camps, not the other way around. Mitchell needed to confirm that the Red Cross could and would handle letters flowing in reverse, from German prisoners in American camps to families in Germany. He placed a telephone call to the Red Cross regional office in Chicago. The woman who answered was named Sarah Chen. No relation to Sergeant Chen, though Mitchell found the coincidence mildly amusing. She was the liaison officer responsible for coordinating POW services in the Midwest region. Mitchell explained the situation. 500 German prisoners at Camp Grant. Male privileges suspended for security reasons. A pilot program to route letters through the Red Cross network. 20 letters ready to go, with more coming if the system proved viable. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Captain Mitchell, Sarah Chen said carefully, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But routing mail from German POWs to Germany through our Geneva office isn't standard protocol. We typically handle the opposite, getting mail from Germany to American prisoners. I understand. But the Geneva Convention guarantees prisoners the right to correspond with their families. We're trying to honor that while maintaining security. The Red Cross is the only neutral channel we have. Have you confirmed with Geneva that they can handle this volume? Not yet. I was hoping you could help facilitate that conversation. Another pause. Then, let me make some calls. I'll need to speak with my supervisor and get approval from our Geneva office. But if they're willing, I can serve as the collection point. You send the letters to me in Chicago. I forward them through our diplomatic pouch to Geneva. They route them into Germany through their existing networks. In theory, it should work. In theory. Captain, I've been doing this job for 2 years. I've learned that in theory and in practice are often very different things. But I'll do what I can. These men deserve to write home. Thank you, Miss Chen. Give me a week. I'll let you know what Geneva says. The week crawled by. Mitchell threw himself into administrative work, trying not to check the mail every 3 hours. Sergeant Chen continued reviewing additional letters from prisoners who'd heard about the program and submitted requests to be included in the next batch. Colonel Brennan said nothing, which Mitchell chose to interpret as tacit approval to continue. In Barracks 7, Werner waited with the particular agony of someone who tasted hope and now feared having it ripped away. What if the Red Cross says no? Otto asked one evening. He was lying on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. What if they can't route the letters? Then we find another way, Werner said, though he had no idea what another way might look like. Or maybe there is no other way. Maybe we just wait here until the war ends and hope our families are still alive when we get home. Werner didn't answer. What could he say? That hope was worth holding on to? Otto had heard that before. Actions mattered more than words. And right now, they were all waiting for someone else to act. On the 8th day, Sarah Chen called Captain Mitchell back. Geneva approved it, she said without preamble. They'll route the letters through their existing networks into Germany. It'll take time, probably 6 to 8 weeks for a letter to reach its destination, longer for a reply to come back. But it'll work. Send me your first batch. I'll get them to Geneva by the end of the week. Mitchell felt something release in his chest. Thank you, Miss Chen. Truly. One condition, Captain. I want to visit the camp, meet these men. See the operation for myself. If I'm going to be routing their mail, I want to understand who I'm doing it for. Absolutely. When can you come? How's Friday? Friday works. Friday arrived cold and gray, with snow threatening in the heavy clouds. Sarah Chen drove up from Chicago in a Red Cross van, arriving at Camp Grant just before noon. She was younger than Mitchell had expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and an efficiency of movement that suggested she didn't waste time on things that didn't matter. Mitchell gave her a tour of the camp, showed her the barracks, the mess hall, the work areas where prisoners spent their days doing laundry and maintenance. She asked good questions. How many prisoners? What was the breakdown by age? Where had they been captured? What were the conditions like? Better than some camps I've seen, she admitted. Worse than others. The men looked tired. They are tired. They've been at war for years. Most of them just want to go home. Don't we all? Mitchell introduced her to Sergeant Chen. The other Chen, as he called him, which earned a small smile from both of them. Then he took her to Barracks 7. Werner and Otto were inside with a dozen other men, most of them lying on bunks, a few playing cards at a makeshift table. They stood when the officers entered, coming to attention. At ease, Mitchell said in English. Sergeant Chen translated to German. The men relaxed slightly, watching Sarah Chen with wary curiosity. This is Miss Sarah Chen from the Red Cross, Mitchell continued. She's going to be helping us get your letters home. I thought she might want to meet some of you. Sergeant Chen translated. A few of the prisoners exchanged glances. Sarah stepped forward. Captain Mitchell tells me you've been waiting months to write home, she said. Sergeant Chen translated sentence by sentence. I want you to know that we're going to do everything we can to make sure your letters reach your families. It won't be fast. The system has to route through Switzerland and then into Germany through networks that are under a lot of strain right now. But we'll get them there. She paused, looking at the men. I know this doesn't make up for the months you've already lost, I know it doesn't change the fact that you're here and your families are there. But it's something. And sometimes something is all we have. Werner found himself stepping forward. In halting English, he said, "Thank you, miss. My wife, I have not heard 8 months. This..." He struggled for the word. "This means everything." Sarah looked at him. "What's your name?" "Werner Hoffman." "You wrote one of the letters we're sending?" "Yes, miss." "To your wife?" "Yes, Elsa. And maybe I have daughter now. I don't know." Sarah's expression softened. "We'll get it to her, Mr. Hoffman. I promise you that." Werner's eyes filled. He nodded, not trusting his voice. After the visit, Sarah sat with Mitchell and Sergeant Chen in the administration building. They'd laid out all 20 letters on a table, each one reviewed and approved, each one representing a thread of connection across an ocean and a war. "These are ready to go?" Sarah asked. "Ready," Sergeant Chen confirmed. She began placing them carefully in a leather courier bag. "I'll have these in Geneva's hands by next week. They'll begin routing them immediately. You should start preparing your men for a long wait. Even in the best case, it'll be February before any replies could possibly come back. More likely March." "We'll prepare them," Mitchell said. Sarah closed the bag and looked at both men. "What you're doing here, it's good work. It's the kind of thing that reminds me why I took this job. There's so much cruelty in this war, so much pointless suffering. But this?" She gestured to the bag. "This is different. This is human." After she left, Mitchell found himself standing in the camp yard, watching prisoners file out for afternoon work detail. They looked the same as they had yesterday, as they would tomorrow. But something had shifted. 20 of them had written letters. 20 of them had taken their longing and loneliness and hope and distilled it into words on paper. And now those words were on their way across the world. It was a small thing, maybe. But Mitchell was starting to believe that small things mattered more than he'd realized. That evening, he called Barracks 7 together for an announcement. Word had already spread that something was happening, and the building was packed with men standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Mitchell stood at the front with Sergeant Chen beside him to translate. "The first 20 letters have been sent," Mitchell said. "They're on their way to the Red Cross office in Chicago, and from there to Geneva, and from there to your families in Germany." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sergeant Chen translated, and the murmur became voices, questions in German. Mitchell raised a hand for quiet. "I want you to understand that this will take time. The Red Cross estimates 6 to 8 weeks for a letter to reach Germany. If your families write back immediately, it could be another 6 to 8 weeks for the reply to reach you. That means most of you won't hear anything until late February at the earliest, more likely March or April." He let that sink in, saw the disappointment on some faces, the resignation on others, but also saw something else: determination, patience, the willingness to wait because waiting now had purpose. "But here's the other thing I want you to know," Mitchell continued. "This isn't just 20 letters. Colonel Brennan has authorized me to expand the program. Any prisoner who wants to write home can submit a letter for review. If it passes censorship, no military information, no intelligence, just personal correspondence. It'll be sent through the Red Cross network. We're opening this to everyone." The barracks erupted. Men shouting questions, talking over each other, voices rising in excitement and disbelief. Sergeant Chen had to call for order 3 times before they quieted enough for Mitchell to continue. "Sergeant Chen will be accepting letters starting tomorrow morning. Write them carefully. Write them honestly. Tell your families you're alive, you're safe, you're thinking of them. But remember that every letter will be read and reviewed. Anything that could compromise security will get the letter rejected and could get you removed from the program permanently. Understood? Heads nodded throughout the room. Good. Dismissed. As the prisoners filed out, talking excitedly in German, Otto grabbed Werner's arm. Did you hear that? Everyone can write now. Everyone. I heard. I'm writing tonight. Tonight, Werner. I'm writing to my parents, even if the address is just rubble. I'm writing it anyway. Werner smiled. It was the first time he'd seen real light in Otto's eyes since Hamburg. Then we'll write together, just like we said. That night, Barracks 7 was transformed. Men hunched over bunks and tables, scratching words onto whatever paper they could find. Some had to borrow pencils. Some had to ask literate friends to help them compose sentences. But everyone wrote. Otto's letter was short. Dear Mama and Papa, I am alive. I am in America, in a camp in Illinois. I am safe. I heard about Hamburg, about the bombing. I don't know if you survived. I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. But I need you to know that I'm thinking about you, that I love you, that I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect you. If you're reading this, please write back. Please tell me you're alive. If you're not reading this, I hope you didn't suffer. I hope it was fast. I hope you knew I loved you. Your son, Otto, he folded it with shaking hands and set it aside to be submitted in the morning. Across the barracks, other men wrote similar letters. To wives and mothers and children, to siblings and friends, to everyone they'd left behind when they'd been shipped off to war. The words varied, but the sentiment was universal. I'm alive. Are you? I miss you. I love you. Please wait for me. By the end of the week, Sergeant Chen had received 127 letters for review. The censorship process took on a rhythm. Chen and his team of 3 German-speaking staff would review each letter carefully, checking for anything that could be considered intelligence. Place names beyond the prisoner's hometown were flagged. References to military units or operations were flagged. Anything that could reveal strategic information was flagged. But almost nothing was actually rejected. These men weren't trying to pass secrets. They were trying to reach home. One letter, from a prisoner named Klaus Richter, nearly broke Chen's heart. My dearest Greta, our son Hans will be 4 years old now. I have missed 3 of his birthdays. I wonder if he remembers me. I wonder if you've told him about me, or if I've become just a photograph on the wall, a story you tell him when he asks about his father. I dream about teaching him to ride a bicycle. I dream about taking him fishing at the lake like my father took me. I dream about reading him bedtime stories and hearing him laugh. I know these are just dreams. I know the war has stolen these years from us and we can never get them back. But when the war ends, and it will end, Greta, it has to end, I promise I will come home. I promise I will be the father Hans deserves. I promise I will love you both with everything I have left. Wait for me. Klaus Chen set the letter down and rubbed his eyes. He'd been reviewing letters for 3 days straight, and each one cut deeper than the last. These weren't monsters. These were just men. Ordinary men caught in the machinery of history, trying desperately to hold on to the things that made life worth living. He approved Klaus's letter without changes. By the 2nd week of January, all 127 letters had been reviewed and approved. They were packaged carefully in waterproof containers, loaded into a Red Cross courier bag, and sent to Sarah Chen in Chicago. She called Captain Mitchell when they arrived. "Got them," she said. 127 letters. They're going out on tomorrow's diplomatic flight to Geneva. Should be there by the end of the week. "Thank you, Miss Chen." "How are the men holding up?" "Better?" Just having written the letters has improved morale dramatically. But they're nervous. Scared the letters won't make it. Scared they won't get replies. Scared their families are dead and they're writing to ghosts. "They might be," Sarah said quietly. "Germany is being destroyed, bit by bit. Cities are rubble. Civilians are dying. Some of these letters probably will end up going nowhere. You should prepare them for that." "I know. But what else can we do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Give them hope. Give them the chance to try. That's all any of us can do." The letters left Chicago on a cold January morning, packed in a diplomatic pouch alongside official Red Cross correspondence. They flew to New York, then across the Atlantic to Lisbon, then overland to Geneva. The journey took 6 days. In Geneva, Red Cross staff sorted the letters by destination: Stuttgart, Hamburg, Berlin, Munich. Dozens of German cities, some still standing, some reduced to rubble. Each letter was catalogued, assigned a tracking number, and routed into the massive network that the Red Cross had built for exactly this purpose. Then they began the final leg of their journey into Germany itself. Some would reach their destinations. Others would bounce back, marked "Address Destroyed" or "Recipient Deceased." But all of them would be tried. All of them would be given the chance to cross the distance between separation and reunion, between silence and connection. At Camp Grant, the waiting began in earnest. Werner counted days. Otto counted hours. Every morning, men would ask Sergeant Chen if any replies had arrived yet, even though they knew it was too soon. But Hope didn't care about timelines. Hope wanted what it wanted immediately. Late February at the earliest, Chen reminded them over and over. More likely March. You have to be patient. But patience was hard when you'd already waited so long. In the evenings, some prisoners started preparing second letters, just in case. Just so they'd have something ready when the first replies came back, if the first replies came back. Writing became a ritual, a way to stay connected across impossible distance, a way to fight against the silence that had nearly destroyed them. One night, Private Danny Rodriguez stopped by Barracks 7 to drop off some supplies. He found Werner and Otto sitting at the table, both working on letters by lamplight. "Still writing?" Rodriguez asked. Werner looked up. "Always writing. What else is there to do?" Rodriguez pulled out a pack of cigarettes, offered them around. Werner and Otto each took one. They lit up, smoke curling toward the ceiling. "My wife, Maria," Rodriguez said after a moment. "She writes me every week, sometimes twice a week. I don't know what I'd do if those letters stopped coming. I think I'd lose my mind." "That's what was happening to us," Otto said quietly. "Before the captain let us write, we were losing our minds." "Yeah, I saw it. We all saw it." Rodriguez took a drag on his cigarette. "For what it's worth, I'm glad Mitchell did this. I know you guys are supposed to be the enemy and all that. But you're just guys, you know? Just guys who want to go home, same as me." "Same as all of us," Werner agreed. They smoked in companionable silence for a while. Then Rodriguez stubbed out his cigarette and stood. "Anyway, thought you should know. The guys are taking up a collection. Some of us want to help with postage for the next batch of letters. It's not much, but we figured it might help." Werner stared at him. "Why would you do that?" Rodriguez shrugged. "Like I said, you're just guys." And guys should be able to write home to their families. Seems simple enough to me. After he left, Otto looked at Werner. Did that just happen? I think so. American soldiers are donating money to help us mail letters to Germany? Apparently. Otto shook his head slowly. This war makes no sense. We're supposed to hate each other. But that man just gave us his cigarettes and wants to help us write home. None of it makes sense. Maybe that's the point, Werner said. Maybe the war is the thing that doesn't make sense. And this, he gestured to the letters they'd been writing, this is what does. By the end of January, a second batch of 89 letters was ready to be sent. Sarah Chen picked them up personally during another visit to Camp Grant, impressed by how smoothly the operation was running. You've built something remarkable here, she told Mitchell. Other camps are starting to ask questions. Word is getting around that Camp Grant is running a successful mail program. You might become a model for the whole system. That wasn't the goal, Mitchell said. The goal was just to help these men stay sane. Sometimes the best results come from the simplest goals. As February arrived, the first terrible possibility began to emerge. What if no replies came back? It had been 6 weeks since the first batch of letters was sent. They should have reached Germany by now. Families should have received them. Replies should be working their way back through the system. But there was nothing. Just more waiting. Mitchell watched the prisoner's mood darken slightly. Not back to where it had been before. They'd tasted hope. And that couldn't be undone. But the edge of doubt was creeping in. What if the letters had been lost? What if the addresses were all destroyed? What if their families were dead and they'd spent weeks writing to ghosts? Give it more time, Sarah Chen urged when Mitchell called her. The networks in Germany are chaos right now. Mail is moving, but it's slow. And replies have to come back through the same channels, which means another 6 to 8 weeks. You're looking at mid-March, minimum, before you should expect anything. I'll tell them. And Captain, prepare yourself. Some of those men won't get replies. Not because the system failed, but because there's no one left to reply. Mitchell knew she was right, but knowing didn't make it easier. In Barracks 7, Werner kept Elsa's photograph tucked inside his jacket, over his heart. He'd written her 4 letters now, even though he hadn't heard back from the first one. He wrote about camp life, about the weather, about the small kindnesses from guards, and the friendships with other prisoners. He wrote about his hopes for after the war. He wrote about the daughter he'd never met and the life they'd build together. He wrote because writing kept hope alive. And hope, he was learning, was worth fighting for even when everything else seemed lost. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, though no one in camp marked it, a telegram arrived at Captain Mitchell's office from Sarah Chen in Chicago. It contained 2 words, letters arriving. Mitchell stared at the telegram for a full minute before he believed it. Then he ran to find Sergeant Chen. They're coming, he said, breathless. The replies. They're starting to come through Geneva. Sarah says the first batch should reach Chicago by the end of the week, and then here a few days after that. Chen's face broke into the widest smile Mitchell had ever seen on him. We did it. It actually worked. It actually worked. How many are coming? She didn't say, but some. At least some of their families are out there. At least some of them are getting through. That evening, Mitchell made another announcement to the assembled prisoners. The first replies from your families have begun arriving in Geneva, he said. Sergeant Chen translated. We should have them here at camp within the next week to 10 days. The barracks erupted in cheers and questions. We don't know how many yet. Mitchell continued, raising his voice over the noise. We don't know who will get letters and who won't. But some of you will hear from home soon. After all this time, after all this waiting, some of you are about to hear from the people you love. Werner felt tears streaming down his face and didn't bother wiping them away. Around him, grown men wept openly, embraced each other, shouted in German and English and a mixture of both. Otto grabbed Werner's shoulders. They're coming, he said, his voice breaking. The letters are coming, Werner. I know. What if mine isn't there? What if my parents... Don't, Werner interrupted. Don't think that way. Not yet. Wait and see. Just wait and see. But he understood the fear, because he felt it too. What if there was no letter from Elsa? What if Stuttgart was rubble and she was gone and he'd spent months writing to a memory? The waiting was almost over. Soon they would know. For better or worse, they would finally know.